Hi there, I'm your host Clive Serkin, and welcome to the Unstuck podcast, where we're on a journey to help you get control of your work environment, get yourself unstuck, and perform to your full potential. Welcome to the first inaugural episode of Unstuck, and my choice of our guest today was an absolute no-brainer, but incredibly important to me and very symbolic. So I wanted to welcome Pete Dulcamara, who's the chief scientist at Kimberly-Clark, a friend and a person who I seek constantly for inspiration, and who is the father of the idea that sort of gave birth to this podcast, which I'll explain in a while. But just wanted to welcome Pete. It's just fantastic having you on this podcast.
Hey, thanks, Clive. It's great to be here. There's nobody else I'd rather talk to and share ideas with than you. I mean, you're an awesome friend, and I really look forward to our discussion today.
Amen. The only thing better would be if we could do it in person over a couple of beers like the old days, but we'll fix that soon.
Yeah.
But I mentioned when I introduced you that you were the father of the idea that sort of spawned this podcast. And I don't know if you remember this because we've had so many conversations over the 15 years, give or take, that we've known each other. But I'll remember vividly when we were talking once, you mentioned the formula P equals P plus E minus B. And you explained it to me that performance, and this was in the context of a conversation about talent, that performance equals potential plus encouragement minus barriers. And I'll never forget how much impact that had on me. Because I had sort of come from the world where most of it come from, where we spend all this time talking about performance management and not so much time talking about potential. And you flipped this on the head. So I'd love you to talk about and take us back to that conversation and talk about this formula and why it was so important to you.
Yeah, no, thanks, Clive. And I remember that conversation. And, a lot of it's based on the work of Tim Galway and also, the whole full potential thinking in lean methodology. But it's this idea that performance is equal to potential minus obstacles plus encouragement. And what I've always found is that managers focus all of their attention on trying to measure somebody's performance and trying to predict somebody's potential. And then managers get into a room with a 2x2 matrix of those people with the highest performance and those people with the highest potential, and they claim that those people are top talent. And I think what leaders do is they really focus on removing obstacles and providing encouragement to people, because the potential of a human being far exceeds our ability to ever comprehend it. And if we can just remove the obstacles and provide encouragement, people's potential will and performance will exceed anything that we can even imagine. And where I really landed on this idea was I always had this belief that, or observation, I never could understand why all of us go through our lives paying our bills on time, volunteering our community, and achieving so many things outside of the work life, all without a supervisor. Why was it that when we walked through the doors of a company, we were brain dead and we need supervision? I never believed we need supervision. What we need is leadership. And that's really the essence of the equation and the leadership aspiration that I have. I know I fall awfully short of that aspiration, but that's what I've always tried to pursue, Clive.
But it's so unbelievably refreshing, and there's a lot in there. But let's unpack some of it. But so you started talking, and I immediately flashed back to like twice a year we'd get in a room, senior leaders in the company, 3 days, and it was all about performance management. And I used to actually feel really good about it because I was going like, wow, this is a real commitment as a company to our talent, and there's a lot of time here and a lot of payroll in the room. We can talk about that, but on the positive side, like that's a really good thing. And but when you flip it around, you come from the perspective, you come, you go, boy, what would happen if we put all that commitment, energy, and positivity into talking about the obstacles and talking about the encouragement?
Yeah, and Clive, just sorry to interrupt, but something that I worked on last year with a gentleman by the name of Jason Fields, who is just awesome. He was the state representative for District 11 in the city of Milwaukee, and he and I got together on this idea that progress, economic progress, is equal to potential minus obstacles. And we wanted to focus this on Black entrepreneurship and Black startups and creating Black millionaires and billionaires, and this idea that the United States is the most underdeveloped nation in the world when you look at our potential. And if we could just remove obstacles from people's way, and if we could provide them just a little bit of encouragement, the progress that could be made would be extraordinary. And the reason why I talk about obstacles and encouragement is because obstacles tend to be external barriers, but we also have internal barriers. So an external barrier is you don't have the training that you need, you don't understand the strategy, you don't have the funds that you need. But there's also interior barriers that we all have, which is I can't do it. I'm not really sure of myself. I don't have the confidence.
Yep.
And so we need a combination of both, removing obstacles and providing encouragement. And I think even more importantly is empowering people to remove their own obstacles and not be a victim waiting for somebody else to remove the obstacle for them.
I couldn't agree more. I'd offer that there's a third group. And the third group is these well intentioned, sort of almost necessary, and then they take on a life of its own obstacles. And that is like there's process, there's organization, there's technology, all of these things that you need for the full functioning of an organization, particularly as it gets larger, but any organization. And I have this perspective that it sort of takes on a life of its own and it becomes additive versus enabling. And it gets to a point where I think you have incredible talent um, who are basically spending more time sort of managing the beast and managing the process and managing the organization than actually doing the thing that you're paying them and that they're passionate about to do. I don't know if you see that, but it's that I sort of, when you step back and step away from it and look at from the outside and you go, wow, you were just adding more rocks into the backpack of these people and saying, work harder, work faster.
Yeah, there's a real difference between riding the beast and feeding the beast, and there's just a lot of effort that goes to feeding the beast, man. One of my favorite books is "Orbiting the Giant Hairball,"
Yeah.
and what the hairball is all the policies and procedures and processes that we put in place, and you end up with this huge giant hairball, which is all these corporate obstacles, quite frankly, and I think the real trick is to figure out how do you orbit that giant hairball where you're not flung into outer space doing stuff that the organization doesn't care about, but at the same time you're not crushed by the gravitational pull of this giant hairball. And so how do you continue to just orbit the hairball so that you can actually get things done?
But I couldn't agree more. And by the way, if you haven't read the book, I'd recommend everyone read that book. You're going to find out in our conversation, Pete, he's like the local library. And so like, we should take advantage of that. And we'll come back to that. But Pete, it's like I suspect people listen to this and going, they're nodding their head and go, couldn't agree more. But how do you sort of enter the patient? How do you like attack this thing? Like, where do you begin? Because we're talking about now taking on sort of the force of an organization. So I'm an individual. I work at a company. I love the company. I couldn't agree more with what Pete's saying. And I'm going to go into the office tomorrow. I'm going to Zoom on tomorrow from my home. Where do I begin? Whether I'm a leader or not a leader.
Yeah, well, the best place to begin, I think the superpower that we all have as human beings is empathy.
Yep.
And empathy really begins with listening. I mean, we've got two ears and one mouth for a reason. We should listen twice as much as we talk. And listening is really an art. You know, many people will come to you with a problem or an issue that needs to be addressed, and I think the real secret is to help them find their own solution. And so, where I typically start is I ask people, hey, what really are your goals? What is your aspiration? What are you really trying to achieve? And then just really listen to what their goal is, what their aspiration is, what their purpose is in life. And then the next set of question is really about, well, what's your current reality? Because what you want to get at there are, what are the obstacles that are holding you back from achieving your dream? And really listen to the obstacles. Don't try to solve the obstacles. Just really listen to the person share those obstacles. And then the third step is to say, okay, well, what are the options to overcome those obstacles? And spend some time. And this is where you can start to talk and start to brainstorm with the person on all the different options that may be available to them to overcome their obstacles so that they can achieve their dream. And then the fourth step is really to encourage them to take action against those options they've identified. And 9 times out of 10, the solution is already inside the person. It's like the Michelangelo quote that, he
Yep.
doesn't, he just removes the rock around the statue. Well,
Yeah.
that's our job as leaders, is to remove the rubble around the solution that already resides in a person. And so, Clive, I think it really does begin with empathetic understanding, and empathetic listening. And that's true even in product design, right? I mean, design thinking starts with empathetic understanding of the consumer, and not assume you understand the problem, but really help the person uh, articulate the problem and come up with their own solution. And again, 9 times out of 10, just a person articulating their own problem, they see the solution themselves.
Couldn't I mean we could talk about this for 3 episodes of podcast because there's a lot to unpack here, and I actually would love to come back to it because I think there's three sort of things over here. One is, and the two I'd love to come back to at another point is like, how do we flip performance management around to potential management, and how do we change the orientation of organizations? The second one is how, in the context of that, impact the three barriers or the three obstacles, which is internal, external, and organizational barriers. I just, even if you don't get to the promised land, there's no question that this could be transformative for companies. But talking about transformation, I want to shift gears a little bit because um, you and I have been talking about this for a while, but I finally, recently got to see the finished product, which was you giving a TED talk, which I just thought was phenomenal. And, for those of you listening, go Google Pete Dulcamara TED talk and watch this because it's pretty amazing. And obviously, I'm not objective, but I'm telling you, it's amazing. There were three things in there in the talk that I'd love you to talk more about. And the first one is the concept of a billionaire and rethinking what it means to be a billionaire. Talk a little bit about that because I think that is incredibly refreshing.
Yeah, I really do believe all of us have the power to change the world. But to change the world, we first need to change our mind. And sometimes that is the most difficult change of all. And Clive, what I've really thought a lot about is this idea of billionaire. And I really do believe every single one of us can become a billionaire if we just stop defining a billionaire as somebody who accumulates $1 billion and start defining it as somebody who helps 1 billion people. And each of us have the power to help 1 billion people, either through your corporation or through charities or through your own efforts. And that's the idea of humanity centric innovation, which is about solving the biggest problems facing humanity in an economically viable way. And that's this whole notion of changing the idea of what a billionaire is.
But which is it fights the conventional sort of I'm hungry, want to make a whole bunch of money concept to I want to serve something bigger and get a greater fulfillment. You talked about in it the three S curves, which I remember one day we were sitting at a bar and you you sketched them out on a napkin for me. Talk a little bit about that, because part of this is sort of how you evolve as a human over time, and sort of what turns you on, what gives you legit reward versus the stuff that you think is meaningful in the beginning.
Yeah, yeah. I had read Bob Buford's book
Yeah.
Halftime, and uh, Peter Block's book Stewardship, and I really came up with this idea of these S curves. And in the TEDx talk, I talk about three S curves, but I actually have four S curves. So maybe I could share the fourth S curve
Amen.
with your audience. But picture on a graph the y-axis being really your purpose in life, and think about that as gaining greater fulfillment and satisfaction. It's your purpose, and then the x-axis is really your passion, the effort, the time it takes, the what you're willing to dedicate yourself to. And there's these three S curves, and the first S curve is struggle to success. Because it doesn't matter what we begin in life. I mean, it doesn't matter if it's a new job or a new sport, whatever it is, kicking off a podcast, it's difficult at first. But if you persevere and you persist, you eventually hit this inflection point, and with a little bit of effort, you become successful. But I think what many of us find is no matter how successful we are in life, the satisfaction, fulfillment, and happiness that we gain from that success can begin to wane and even decline over time. And so there's this second S curve, which is really service to significance. This is all about gaining greater significance in life through service over self interest. Because the first S curve, the success S curve, is all about adding value to yourself. The significance S curve is all about adding value to others to gain greater significance in life. And so that's that second S curve. The third S curve, which starts to get into the spiritual realm, although in the TEDx talk, I talk about it in terms of future generations. But the third S curve is to surrender to salvation. This is where we surrender our ego. We surrender ourself, not only for our own salvation, but for the salvation of others and for the salvation of future generations, and quite frankly, for every form of life on the planet. So those are the three S curves that I talked about in the TEDx talk. The fourth S curve really does get off.
Which is a bonus to this podcast.
Yes,
Only this is the first time we're hearing about it, right?
it's the very first time.
Amen.
And the fourth S curve is sacrifice to sanctification.
Huh.
This is where you obviously completely sacrifice yourself to gain sanctification in God's eyes. And ultimately, I believe that, I don't believe, that's what it says in the Bible, is God's will is the sanctification of every person on earth. And so those are the four S curves that I think people go through in life. It's a journey from success to significance, significance to salvation, and salvation to sanctification. And, I'm somewhere between success and significance. I've sometimes am afraid to let go of the, one rope to grab onto the other one. But I want to pursue greater significance in life.
I given the struggle we had to get the technical part of this podcast going, I think I'm still struggling for success. But I have hope. I have hope. It's again come back. We thought about the podcast in terms, the notion of unstuck, and originally thought about it in terms of just like unstuck from a technology standpoint. But when you think about it, it's if you just go back to our conversation, and for those who are listening, but certainly for me, there's so many doors you can open up that help you to unlock yourself, in small and big ways. And we've gone from, sort of pedestrian stuff to some pretty heavy stuff in the end here. But it's incredibly provocative for me in terms of the way you think about it. You made a side comment, and you've made it a couple of times in conversations with me, which I think is sort of fundamental to all of this, which is the notion of courage. Because I think everybody knows internally what they need to do, or they have an instinctive notion of what they need to do. Maybe not all of us as articulate as Pete Dulcamara, but there's this the X thing for me is the courage to do it. I'm assuming that's what you mean by it. Um, the courage of conviction to do what you instinctively know is right. Is that what you meant, or am I misreading it?
No, that's absolutely right. I mean, one of the things that I talk about in the TEDx talk is that, if we really do want to change the world, it really takes two things. One is imagination, the ability to imagine a better world. And the second piece is the courage to take action, the courage to step forward. So I always think of business results is equal to idea time execution, right? So you can have the best idea in the world, but if you don't have execution, you have zero business results. Or you can have the best execution in the world, but your idea stinks. Again, you're going to have poor business results. And so it really takes both those things, imagination and courage, to really drive execution to achieve results or progress in whatever you're doing in life. It's really those two things at the end of the day is imagination and courage. And I mean, I think that's what's really driven our species forward, is those two things: the ability to imagine a better life, and then the courage to actually take action. And it's those that take action that really create a better world.
Amen to that. It's interesting because every time we have these conversations and we have these often, it's like I just come back to this thing. It's like if you walked into work every day and just sort of spend a little time and just go like, how am I gonna go through today versus what a lot of us do is just walk in and go into autopilot. I think you make a huge dent, not just in terms of how your quality of your days and your quality of life is, but certainly around the people around you. So anyway, what,
Well,
what I would say,
Clive, just one thing on that real quick for your
yeah,
listeners, and I don't know if this will resonate with anybody, but I never think of myself as an employee of Kimberly-Clark. I never thought of myself as an employee of Dow Chemical. I think of me as an owner of Kimberly-Clark. And as a matter of fact, when I look at my portfolio, I own KC stock. So de facto, I am an owner. And
yeah.
so I wake up every morning not asking myself, how do I work for Kimberly-Clark? I ask myself, how can Kimberly-Clark work for me? Because I really do want to help improve people's lives, but I don't have the financial or technical wherewithal to pull it off. Kimberly-Clark does. So I wake up asking myself, how do I use the resources of Kimberly-Clark to create better care for a better world? And by the way, that's Kimberly-Clark's vision as well. So everybody wins in my way of thinking. So I'm not a megalomaniac. It's about really trying to get to this mindset that I'm here to achieve my purpose in life, and I'm doing that through my employer. And I think that's a much healthier way to go through life. And one of the things I talk about in my TEDx talk is I really do believe in the 20th century, institutions hired individuals. But I think what we're going to see in the 21st century is individuals are going to hire institutions to achieve your own personal mission, to really drive humanity centric innovation, and for every single one of us to become billionaires by helping a billion people. And the two aren't mutually exclusive. I think the best way to become a billionaire is to help a billion people. And so, I think that is the opportunity that lays in front of us.
Well, the latter becomes therefore a consequential outcome of the former, and a much more enjoyable thing. Pete, we're getting close to the end. And by the way, you should watch Pete's TED talk, but soon Pete will be writing a book, if I have anything to do with it. So stay tuned over there. But Pete, the concept is getting unstuck. A lot of, if not everything you talked about, is sort of implies or it requires that people sort of sprinkle in their brain. Um, a lot of times people are like, "What book have you read lately?" I was like, "What have you been doing lately to sort of sprinkle in your brain and keep your heads fresh and your perspective fresh?"
Yeah, no, one book that I read over the holiday that I've given a lot of thought about is Ikigai, which is a Japanese word, Ikigai. And what Ikigai is the intersection between four things. Ask yourself, what do I really love in life? That's one set of questions. The next one is, what am I really good at? I mean, what can I really do well? The third one is, what does the world need? And then the fourth one is, what can you get paid to do? And at the intersection of those four, what you love to do, what you're good at doing, what the world needs, and what you can get paid to do is your Ikigai. And the key about Ikigai is it really helps you identify your purpose in life. And the point of this whole book is those people who live the longest are those people who have a purpose in life. And one of the things I always say is I never want to retire. But what I want is a renaissance. I want a renaissance in my life rather than retirement in my life. And the best way to achieve that is to know what your Ikigai is, what your purpose is, what you love, what you're good at, what you get paid to do, and what the world needs. And give some thought to that, because at the intersection of those four things is really the purpose of your life. And once you find your purpose, you can live your purpose. And once you live your purpose, you can fulfill your purpose. And I think that's what we're all here to do.
Amen. Well, sadly, we've run out of time, but I suspect we'll be having another few episodes with Pete as our guest. I'm pretty sure at this point, everyone now understands why Pete is so important to me and why he was our first inaugural guest of Unstuck, and hopefully a reoccurring guest over the time. And who knows, Pete, maybe the co-host, if I can squeeze some time out of you. But hey, listen, as always, an absolute joy spending time with you. I really appreciate you being so generous with your thinking and your thoughts, and giving up the time to spend with us today. Thanks very much, Pete Dulcamara.
Thank you, Clive Serkin. You're the best, man. Anytime.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, sir. Talk soon.
All right.
Take care.
Thank you. All right, bye.
This podcast was brought to you by Screen Dragon. We break down barriers, make work flow, and unlock talent. Visit ScreenDragon.com to see our software in action.